Welcome to the Social Your Sales podcast. Social has changed the B2B and professional services sales landscape forever. We are here to help you navigate what you need to know and how to execute these new strategies. Whether you are a sales leader, individual producer, or a member of the C-suite looking for answers, this is the podcast for you. Now here are your hosts, Brandon and Eric.
Hey, this is Brandon, and welcome to Social Your Sales. And we just got off a great discussion with James Berry, who's a business development rep from Beacon Talent, and he's quite a bit younger than us. It was a great conversation. What'd you think?
I think he's less than half of our age.
Probably.
But but you know what? When we're talking about social and social selling, hey, you know what? We got to have our ears open to that because we're sort of the newcomers to the market more than his age group is. I mean, we may have been there from the beginning.
I don't know if I can buy that.
Oh,
but okay.
Come on, man.
I don't want to admit it.
We're old. Okay. No, but this was a great conversation. We got in actually some interesting differences of not necessarily of opinion, but of definition.
Yep.
Of certain things. And and part of that that we talk about is the difference between personal branding and micro-influencers, which this is one of my hot topics. Because
I can tell. I think we're gonna
we need
talk
to have
about
a show about the influencer marketplace. But James gave us some great ideas, gave people some great ideas for how you go about looking for buyer intent without necessarily having access to a major system that's giving you that third-party intent.
Yep.
Or, of course, you can also, if you have FunnelAmplified, you can get that first-party buyer intent.
There's a little pitch right there. That's really good.
Right in front of you.
Yeah, and I would say for anyone listening, the highlight for me, I think for you all as listeners, is the tip that he gave, the tactic that he gave for social listening, I think is excellent, and you should listen to the rest of it just to hear what that is. So everybody, let's go enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Social Your Sales. I look over and Eric's got this big smile on his face. It's gonna make me start laughing before we even get started. But hey, we're very glad you're here today. We're gonna jump right in because we have James Berry who's with us. James is a younger man than I am. Who I met online. We communicated, we went to a Zoom, we had a great talk, and I wanted James to come on and share about his, experience as a practitioner using social selling. So quick about James. James is a business development for Beacon Talent, and Beacon Talent, it's a consultancy that specializes in helping growth stage startups. I love that he shares this. He's got one failed business under his belt. I love people that have the war wounds. And his failed business was in creating craft beer, right? Which we got to chat about. So in his spare time, he writes, he sails, he rock climbs, and he still enjoys visiting microbreweries. So James, welcome to Social Your Sales.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me. The business was actually a little bit more niche than that. It was a craft meadery, so alcohol made from honey. But I did work at a craft brewery during that time for a little bit. Got to see what it was like to work in the alcohol industry, and it was a good experience, but not for me. Not what I wanted to do long term. All
right. Well, Eric, you want to jump in and ask him the first question today? Because I've been talking too much already.
Am I going to ask it about mead?
We might. We can talk about mead. I know the chef in Eric's coming out going, ooh, interesting.
Well, you don't find many folks that have been in the mead business because it's a fraction of the market. But I will say this: what I am kind of interested in is you've got some lessons that you've learned in social and things like that. Did you have any outreach from a social perspective when you were trying to put together the meadery? What was your efforts there, and what do you think worked and didn't work?
Well, the meadery itself was a very different, I would say, business experience. We were tackling all the problems that come with building a business. So production, branding, incorporating a company, copywriting, finding an actual physical location. So no, actually going to Beacon, I had very little experience. My first job was as a fundraiser, so you could say that's sales. But I know this is about social selling. So, over my year and a half working at Beacon so far, I tested many, many different sales strategies. And the one that just stuck at the end of the day was social selling. And it's the one that I pretty much do on a daily basis now. And it's by far the most effective sales strategy I've come across.
And we love the term. I hate the term social selling, and I know sometimes I get in trouble for saying that, but it's really more about, for me, it's about creating conversations and having a personal brand that people are drawn to instead of repelled from. And as salespeople, we can be very repelling if we're not careful, right? So tell us more about what does that mean to you? And I don't really care what term you use, but what's your behavior like on digital and in social?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the distinction I want to make before kind of diving into this is personal branding and social selling are two different items. Personal branding is kind of who you are, what you care about. And the goal there is to be an authentic person that makes people want to talk to you and makes people want to have a conversation with you. People don't want to have a conversation with somebody who's going to sell them something. People want to have a conversation with other human beings. So the personal branding is part of social selling, but it's not actually social selling. Social selling to me is having kind of conversations the way you'd have it with your friend and just asking people questions. So the biggest mistake I made when I first started doing social selling was trying to immediately pitch people and thinking, hey, if I can get my pitch out, if I can use automation, if I can reach out to hundreds of people, then I will, get, whatever scale brings and automation brings, which is absolutely no responses because people don't like being pitched.
Wait. You mean to tell me that when you start a conversation with somebody by pitching them and you automate it at scale, it doesn't work?
Gosh, go figure.
It does not work.
Hey, it sounds a lot like all the people that tell me all the time, they're like, oh, social sales doesn't work. Social selling doesn't work. I've put so many ads on LinkedIn and none of them have paid off. Or, it's like, really? You're not social selling or even coming close to it. Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you separate personal branding from social selling because I actually sort of see them as one. I mean, you did say one's incorporated in the other, but who you are as that humanized version, nobody buys from someone who they don't have some interaction with, right? At least in B2B or professional sales types environments. So do you think, is it a separate item or can somebody create their personal brand that includes their personal side and incorporate that as the overall social selling strategy so that people know who they're buying from?
Yeah, I mean, I think creating a personal brand is actually very hard. I think creating one that is authentic and that people want to connect with while also intertwining it with who you are and what you sell is difficult. It's something that I'm still working to do today. But I think the personal brand, the whole entire part of it, if you think about like sales and marketing, they are very combined at the end of the day. And say if you're an SDR and you're listening to this podcast, the best SDRs that I know have personal brands, and they have personal brands around what they sell, and they have actual reasons that they work at the companies they work for. So, for example, what we sell a service which pretty much helps growth stage companies hire. The reason I joined Beacon is I have run hiring processes before, and I've been part of hiring processes before, and I have done a terrible job in both. And I've had a terrible experience in both. And so I joined because I knew what the service we were offering was actually needed. And so when I create content, a lot of that content is actually in relation to what I do and what I talk about in the hiring process itself. And if you're able to create content around what you sell, it just makes you a more authentic person. And people want to talk to people who really understand their needs and the challenges they're going through. So I guess, there are blurred lines, but in my mind, personal branding is like what you put on your about page, your face, your posts. Social selling is when you're actually going out and having conversations with people. And at the end of the day, sales is just having conversations. So the more conversations you have, the more deals you can create and the more potential clients you can close.
Yeah, I got to say, James, with all respect, I don't agree. And I love that you're on here talking about it, though. I mean, I think that our personal brand is created through our digital presence and our behavior, especially on social media. And if you take it offline, it's the same thing. If I walk into a networking event, number one, my clothes speak, like all the nonverbals speak, right? My clothes, what I'm wearing, my haircut, what I'm drinking, if it's a cocktail party, how loud I'm speaking or how loud I'm not, who I'm talking to, how much I'm talking to them, the topics that I'm talking about, if I'm going in with my brochure in hand or figuratively my brochure in hand, like all those things speak to the room. And I believe that we have a 24-hour-a-day digital presence because anybody can come to our profile. They can go to they could see us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, wherever our presence are, and learn about us and make a decision of, is this somebody I want to go speak with, or is this somebody I want to run to the other side of the room because they're obnoxious, or I don't really care to. What do you guys, go ahead.
Well, I think, so now to play devil's advocate just a little bit and back James up, okay?
You got a friend in there, James.
Well, I think that it depends on your definition of personal branding. Because personal branding your personal brand can be everything you just said, which it absolutely is everything you just said. But I think there's a second level to it. And that second level falls more under the realm of the micro-influencer type activity. And, these days, everybody is trying to become a micro-influencer, especially in a certain age group. There you go, exactly. That trend to become a micro-influencer, or better yet, a paid influencer, which is even the better gig. We see 12-year-old kids playing video games on YouTube, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a different personal brand there. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we say personal brand, our thoughts are more towards the professional. Look, I'm in B2B sales. This is how I outwardly show myself. It's who I am if we meet at a cocktail party and we're talking over drinks or what have you. That's the personal brand. Whereas this influencer thing has, and you can see it all over like TikTok and things like that. They've built these part of their personal brand, which is very, very powerful, but that's never going to engage in a B2B sales process or professional services sales process.
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't think they would.
Okay, when we're done, I'm going to pull up several people on TikTok who are selling either cars or financial wealth advisor services or others. So that's why I think there's such a blurred line. James, you're our guest. Let me let you jump back in. There's these blurred lines, and Eric and I can fight all day long, but we've only got 20 minutes with you.
So I think there are blurred lines between sales and marketing, and the better you can blur them, the more effective you're going to be. But at the end of the day, when you think about marketing, you think about branding and you think about running ads. And when you think about sales, at least in the B2B context, you think about having conversations with people and trying to purchase a product. Mm-hmm. When it gets to the B2C context and you start bringing in TikTok, it's a little bit different because you can buy a car without interacting with anybody. You can buy a car from Tesla without talking to a salesperson. And that's a B2C product. You can't really buy, at least for what we sell, which is a service, a B2B service product without talking to the salesperson.
Well, and that's it. That's why I think, so I agree with you. There's sales and marketing differences. I think you said it came to a branding issue. I think the difference is when you throw the word personal in there, personal branding, that's where the lines get really blurred because and it's the same thing with companies, right? The way a company behaves speaks a lot about their brand and about their culture. That's why so many companies invest in giving back, and they've got their social giving or their sponsorships because they want to be known as being a good, caring, loving company, whatever that may be. So our personal brands, I think, are so important because and the reason I think there's such a blurredness there, and they're very the same, is that my persona, my online person, and the way I represent myself through my behavior has then got to reflect how I sell, if you will, and I'm, air quotes for people on the podcast, how I sell, because if I'm one person on here, then I get them on a call and I'm a hard sell, hardcore closer, I'm still going to lose them. That's why I think that there's such a just a fluidity that goes back and forth between those.
Yeah, I mean, people.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
You're the guest. We keep overdoing you.
I was just gonna say, it's like at the end of the day, people want authenticity. That is what they care about because, and again, it does matter what you sell. And again, using the car example, like for Tesla, people, they know what they're buying. They're buying a very highly engineered, state-of-the-art car. But if you are selling a service, specifically B2B, people want people who they can trust, because that at the end of the day is the most valuable thing. And I believe being an authentic person and matching, like you said, Brandon, the way that you present yourself online, in person, but the way that you sell is a very effective way of actually moving forward deals and opening up conversations, because people want authenticity. I think that's hard to find these days, especially in the sales process.
Social Your Sales will be right back.
Is your sales team struggling to hit quota? Are your buyers ignoring your sales requests for conversations? The third tier of digital transformation is social. Is your team equipped to meet this challenge? This show is brought to you by FunnelAmplified. We help sales teams align their sales process with how modern buyers prefer to make their purchase decisions. FunnelAmplified is a social selling platform that drives new opportunities with your sales team, using proven social selling tactics to drive pipelines and hit quotas. With FunnelAmplified, it's quota achieved. To learn more about FunnelAmplified or start a free trial, please visit us at FunnelAmplified.com.
I'm going to go back to this micro-influencer thing. This is where B2C is really going. I mean, this, whether it's influencer or micro-influencer, that's where the majority is. Now, it happens to a certain extent in the B2B market, more from a software, maybe platform perspective of things that people can download individually, and they're not $50,000 or $100,000. It's $99 or $9 or 99 cents for a download. That's where I think there is that influencer in the B2C marketplace. However, for the most part, what you've both been saying is absolutely true. People want authenticity. They want to talk to the salesperson in that B2B sale. There's almost always going to be that personal interaction in a B2B sale of any consequence, let's say. I mean, not everything is a big, huge decision, but in those large decisions, that modern buyer's journey kicks in, and there's many people involved, and your brand is going to speak. And it's also going to be very important that the person that makes that final decision and says, yes, you're the person I want to do business with, you're the company I want to do business with, that their reputation isn't sullied by what happens down the road. No. So they need to have that trust level. And trust me, having been in the corporate world for 34 years, I've had vendors that I've dealt with that have, they've failed in large measure and left me holding the bag in many cases. And it's not a good feeling. And it's not one that you typically get over when that person then goes to a different company, calls you up again, thinking they're your best pal. So that definitely is the personal branding within the B2B sales arena.
James, let me ask you this question. In an offline world, so let's forget social for a second, forget digital. Do you consider activities at a networking event, whether it's the party the night before a conference starts, if any of us remember what conferences were, right? Or an actual networking event in your hometown, you go, people have cocktails. Do you consider that a sales activity, or is that a different type of activity?
That's a networking activity, which is in part a sales activity. And I think the interesting thing about networking is that people who are not extremely good at sales rely on networking to do their sales. But you can't scale a sales organization by aggressively networking. You need to scale a sales organization through a proven sales process. So while I think networking is effective, it's not a scalable sales process, but it should be used as part of a sales process.
That's very interesting. What's your thoughts on that?
It's funny because I've for years and years, have been a slave to the sales process concept. And there were KPIs, and there were tactics that led to those KPIs, and strategies that led to the tactics, and so on and so forth, up the line. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the measurement of those KPIs was in some CRM system that was the global light of truth as to what happened and what didn't happen, because if it wasn't in CRM, it didn't happen. And I can tell you that, the things like the promise of CRM and whatnot, that there's been a misstep there with marketing not doing anything with that data, right? So I'm not going to rail against CRM here, but I've got some personal issues with it. No, but I think I don't know. I think that I think you can scale networking with people. I think that it's just how you do it is different now. And what you're saying kind of reminds me of old school sales tactics, where there has to be a sales cycle or a sales process. You go through that sales process. That's the way it's going to be every time. And what I have found over the years is that a sales process, maybe I'm going through all the same steps, but it may happen in a conversation, or it might happen over 9 months or 12 months.
It may happen in a different order.
It may happen in a different order. I mean, in a perfect world, if I were to I guess you have to define what the textbook is. So if you define the textbook sales process, then yes, it's this, then this, then this, and this. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you've got to teach new salespeople some common lexicon. So for that, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you're B2B sales and you're selling, especially if it's big dollar items, it's all about the relationship at that point. It's going to be, you better have understood their requirements. You better understand their business. You better be presenting something that is of relevance to them. But if you don't have that relationship, all that's for naught.
Yeah, and James, it makes me, so two questions I had as you were saying that. Number one is, if you can explain, to what level of relationship do you believe you need in your current role right now to close deals? And then secondly, explain to us what you mean is that sales process. What are those activities and tactics that are alongside your social networking that are more of what you're calling the sales process?
Yeah, so I guess to repeat the first question, what do I mean, or what level of, trust and relationship do I need to get to in the sales process? It's a really high level of trust. It's incredibly high. And that has caused me to focus most of my efforts on building referral networks and looking at who are our current clients and how can they refer us business. And how do you actively make it easier to get inbound referrals? Because I don't know the percentage of deals that we close from warm referrals versus cold outbound, but I can tell you it's at least 2x, probably 3x. I'm referring to the close percentage. Mm-hmm. So a deal that comes in warm probably closes 33% of the time, while a deal that comes in cold probably closes around 10% of the time. So the trust required is very high. And when you get an introduction, the trust is already established via somebody being like, hey, this is a good group of people, you should talk to them.
Right.
In terms of the actual sales process itself, I always think about that. If I were to bring on somebody else who's brand new, how would I give them the tools and the strategy and the tactics to go repeat the success that I have already done? And so that's what I think about when establishing a sales process, because I can't just be like, hey, go out and network and go talk to people, because that's such it's so hard to tell people how to network properly. It's actually, you just learn it and you learn how to be yourself, you learn how to be authentic, and that always goes back to the personal brand.
If only there was a company out there that trained people how to network on social media.
Boy,
and give them a platform to do that.
Hey, I know. I heard about this
we should start a
company called FunnelAmplified that does that, as a matter of fact. They can do it for a single sales rep or a single person or an entire team.
Hey, look at that. We had a commercial right in the middle of the podcast. There you go. James, I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Maybe I set you guys up on purpose.
I know. I thank you for teeing that one up.
Well, when I hire a salesperson, I want to be confident that I can give them the tools to go out and repeat what I have done. So that's why I think networking events are valuable. And it's where my most important relationships come from. But I wouldn't hire somebody to just come in and network. I would want to hire somebody to come in and to execute on a specific set of behaviors, which would include networking, but it would also include reaching out to people on LinkedIn, emailing them, cold calling them, whatever you think works the best for your sales process. Because unless they're doing that, there's no way that I can have confidence that I can train them and improve how they're doing their current process if I'm not able to do it myself. Yeah. So I think the lines between networking and a sales process become very blurred. But if you start thinking about scaling a team into like 10 sales reps, you have to be able to give them a process and a playbook that you can provide feedback on that you know is repeatable.
Yeah, the only thing I would say in response is I don't know the last time I've made a cold call or a cold email in order to generate revenue.
I don't think I've ever made one that worked, honestly.
There's fair.
I mean, it's always, everything I've ever done has been on referral. Now, I've been in the graphic communications industry for 34 years. You build a network of people at that point. You speak at conferences, at different events and whatnot. People get to know who you are. Yep. So you have, in some cases, and it's funny, LinkedIn plays an interesting role in that, though, because I can't tell you how many times I've walked in, let's say, with a sales rep as a subject matter expert for them or as a resource for them. And I walk in with a sales rep, and that person already knows all about me. And they're like, hey, you do that radio show, that cooking radio show, which I did for 13 years. Yep. And you're a chef, and I saw you cook at this show, this Print Expo or something like that. Yep. And so it's amazing how and that was part of my personal brand, and still is part of my personal brand.
Yeah, and it blurs into the sales side. Cool. So what, James, is your, one of the things that we talked about before you came on too, is to talk about social listening and identifying buyer intent. What do you do around that? I mean, buyer intent is a huge topic right now. Mm-hmm. Right? First party buyer intent, which is what we do. You got third party intent companies out there like 6 Sense and others. Well, I'm very curious, what do you mean by social listening to identify buyer intent?
So I love this topic, and sorry, when you said you haven't closed a deal via cold anything in a very long time, I just want to brag. I closed a deal this week via a cold outbound on LinkedIn using buyer intent, actually. Excellent. So I want to be very specific around buyer intent. So you have a lot of companies, the first one that comes to mind because we talked to them is like Bombora. And the way that they get their buyer intent is by tracking what you're searching for across company domains. It's not very specific on buyer intent. It's kind of like, in general, this company might be purchasing something, if it was related to me, like recruiting related. It could be software. It could be contingent recruiting services. I don't know. But buyer intent specifically through social listening is listening to what people are talking about, listening to what people are saying, and then connecting that back to your service or your product when you go out to them cold.
Now, how are you listening? What does that look like practically when you say go out and listen? What does that mean exactly for people that are listening?
So what I do, and this is where the majority of my deals come from, is I look to see what people are posting on LinkedIn. So you can post or you can scan through posts that are within your network. And if you search for your product and then the keyword recommend, it will pop up people who are looking for recommendations for something that you might be selling. So for example, if you are selling a CRM system and you search for CRM recommend, you will get people who are in the market to buy a CRM system at that moment. So you are contacting them at a very highly relevant point in time when they are looking to buy maybe your product and be educated on it. So you can do that via LinkedIn. You can do that on Facebook. You can do that via Slack. And that is, I think, the most straightforward way, because when you reach out to them, you're like, hey, I saw that you're looking for this. I sell it. Would you like to talk? Obviously, you're going to be a little bit more nuanced than that because people probably won't be like, hey, I sell this. I'm going to respond to you. But that's how I think about buyer intent. And it's really getting down to the individual. And it's something that you can't automate, at least not yet.
Right. And then what do you do from there? So you do a search in, say, LinkedIn. You see somebody that says recommend, CRM as an example. What do you do from there? How does that work?
You send them a connection request and you ask them a question. People love answering questions, because if they think you might have something to offer them, it's kind of this I want to see what's behind the door and what is this person possibly going to say? So like my go-to one is when people are looking for recruitment help, I ask them, are you looking for an internal recruiter or are you looking for a third-party recruiter? They usually accept my connection request, then they respond. And I try and get them to the point where I'm like, hey, this is actually what we do. Would you be interested in learning more? If they say yes, then I record a personalized video and send it to them. That is my sales process. It has a very high conversion rate. And the thing that I think is unique about it is I'm not pitching people until they say they want to be pitched. Because if somebody gets a pitch and they don't see it coming, they're going to be like, no, I don't want to talk to that guy. He's trying to sell me. But you just want to be upfront and you're trying to discover whether or not they even have a need for your service before you pitch them.
So you're saying they're showing that they want to be pitched based on the fact that they've looked for recommendations about that type of a solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's the easiest one. If people are talking about their recruitment process, they're talking about hiring, if they're talking about anything as it relates to building out a team, I will usually either ask them a question about it in a connection request, I will comment on their post, like their post, I will follow them, or I will say, hey, look, I really like the fact that you give out, and this is a real life example of a meeting I booked via this way. I really like the example that you will give out your own references of what it's like to work underneath you. This was to a sales leader. And he said that in one of his posts. And I personally think that's a very admirable thing to do, to be like, hey, I'm not only going to ask the candidate for references, I'm going to give references of what it's like to work for me, because recruitment is a two-way street. And the thing about social selling is being authentic and being sincere about what you say to people. You have to do it, or else people are going to know you're coming across as fake.
You know what I love about that is, James, as we're wrapping up on time, I think you and I are fully in alignment. We just use different terms. Because I think what that activity that you just described right there, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'd call that sales process. That's part of your sales process?
I would say liking and commenting is part of the sales process, but that's where it also gets into personal branding, because you are putting something out there for the rest of the world to see. Sales is a one-on-one conversation. That is how I would define it.
Yeah, and I think that it is a blurred line there, and I think I love that tactic that you just explained. And anybody listening right now, if you're not doing that, do it now. Yep. And if you don't know how to do it still, James is going to tell everybody right now how you could contact him, and I'm sure he'll be glad to teach you how to do it, because he loves to network as well. James, I think this was a great conversation. I hope you were okay with where it went, and I disagree with you on things, but I think as we wrap it up together, and I know you and I were disagreeing, I think we all agree. We just maybe have different, maybe the lines are in different places or the terms are blurred.
This is such a good lesson to be learned, though, because many of the terms we're talking about didn't exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, okay? So people have, in their minds, preconceived notions about what some of these terms are, how they're used, and so on. Yeah. We just need to have these discussions, because in the end, I think we're all saying the exact same thing. Right. I don't think there's any space between the areas of disagreement or.
I don't think we're all saying the same thing, because I think there are people out there that say, "Hey, social selling."
I'm saying
is
the three of us.
Got it.
Three of us.
Yeah.
So in the end, but we can still disagree within the context of that. So what it simply means is, when we're having these discussions, larger discussions with other people about social selling, we need to understand that their paradigms are different as well.
Yeah, they're scary. How many different definitions are out there? So James, thank you so much, and please take a moment to tell everybody where they can find you. You can tell everybody about Beacon and the value proposition you have there, and wrap us up. Yeah.
Look, the best way to find me is to just search for me. Obviously, James Barry. It's kind of spelled like the fruit, but Barry. My company is Beacon Talent. We help growth stage businesses hire. I love talking about personal branding, social selling. So if you want to talk with me, just feel free to reach out. And Brandon, Eric, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed the discussion today.
Hey, it was great. And I know that, this was his first podcast guest. Lucky us.
First podcast.
His first time being a guest on a podcast. So thank you so much for doing that with us, James.
Thank you for listening to the Social Your Sales podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends. Social is meant to be social, and sharing is a great way for us to meet you and get to know you. Click on share and tag us at FunnelAmplified or just use #SocialYourSales.